morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Erik Bush. I'm the CEO and founder of Demand Driven Technologies. We're going to wait a few minutes before we start the webinar here to let some of the additional attendees get online. So if you can just hold with us for a few minutes, that would be great. Okay, let's get started. A couple housekeeping points here. The audience will be in a listen-only mode if you have questions, and we very much encourage you to utilize the Zoom panel on your screen to post questions. We'll cover those off at the end of the session. We will be recording this, and there will be a link available after the meeting to utilize to refresh and share with other colleagues of yours that may have an interest in this. Really appreciate your taking time to meet with us here as we approach the holiday season. And so what our topic is for today is demand planning. It's a new module that we introduced into the Intuiflow platform earlier in the third quarter and has already started to have new subscribers to it. So we're quite excited about this enhancement to our overall platform. In terms of what our agenda is for today, we'll talk a little bit about market context. I tend to lead most of our webinars off with a little bit of comment about what the market situations are, kind of what we're trying to do in helping clients improve their supply chain performance. We'll talk about why demand planning was a good fit for us to add to the Intuiflow platform. We'll talk a bit about our integration and how this solution actually works, and then we'll go into a quick overview demo so that you can get an idea of the functionality. We think this is a real big plus for us as we go forward. In terms of market realities, this is a chart I've been using for a few years now, and I've always found it to be a bit of a mind-boggling statistic that U.S. manufacturers, based on data from the U.S. Federal Reserve, have not improved their supply chain inventory turnover rates over the past 25 years. There's been a lot of money spent on ERP systems, supply chain planning solutions, and things of that nature. And it feels like we should have been able to see some tangible improvement. While in the middle of the graph, you'll see that things were getting a bit better during the heady times leading up to the economic downturn in the late 08, 09 kind of time frame. And obviously over here on the right, you can see a big spike in the wrong direction when COVID initially hit. But the reality is that there's a need out there to get to a better place in terms of the planning solutions that we have in the market and the results that we should be able to deliver for our users in that space. As well, clients are continuing to talk to us about kind of these VUCA conditions, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, that are out there in the market. This is coming from a number of different directions, and I'm not going to single any one of them out specifically, but if you think about trying to get forecasts more accurate, if you think about the labor and staffing issues that most companies are having, either through the pandemic or even now as people have kind of selected different career paths and the like, finding the right staff to utilize the supply chain software has been a bit of a challenge. There's always this firefighting that you see in most companies' operations that obviously would be better to bring into control. Item and SKU proliferation is a big factor. Companies, as they continue to try to compete in their respective markets, are adding new products, new families to their portfolio. And at the same time, the general trend has been there that the material planning staffs and supply chain planning staffs headcount numbers are drifting downwards. So this is making a diverging point, making it more and more difficult to get our planning sorted out in the right way. And then inevitably, because of those other factors, we're constantly facing a lot of workarounds and challenges and trying to get to a better place. So we really believe that this focus as a business in manufacturing and distribution and the like should be around creating agility and resilience. If we're agile, it's as defined, in the dictionary, marked by ready ability to move with quick and easy grace. If you could say that your supply chain management system and staff and all of the functionality you've got in that arena, we're really giving you that flexibility. Your life would be a lot easier. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement here in creating more agility. And we'll talk a little bit about what are some of the fundamental concepts that help make that happen. And then resilience is about being able to withstand and recover from difficult conditions. And at the bottom line, what we're talking about here is we as a planning community need to become comfortable and accept the fact that the future is uncertain, right? The only one thing we really know is that we really don't know what's going to happen. And so the more able we are to build flexibility into our planning approach, the way we utilize our solutions and things like that, we are obviously going to be in a better situation to adapt and respond to whatever conditions come our way. I was recently at the Gartner Supply Chain Summit in Phoenix a couple of weeks ago. Their keynote speaker was absolutely pointing this out. And in fact, the keynote speaker was talking a lot about you've got to quit trying to get to that perfect forecast. Now, we're going to talk about demand planning today. There's absolutely a role for demand planning and forecasting, but it's how we use that information and what we expect from it that I think are the important things to start to, maybe adjust a little bit and put us in a better place. From a material planning standpoint, a lot of what it's going to take to give you agility is going to depend on where in this spectrum you are operating. You may be at both ends. If I'm heavily in a make-to-stock orientation, that my products are consistent, I'll utilize Coca-Cola Beverages of Africa as an example here, then I'm likely to have, in terms of how I create agility, the ability to flex and utilize demand-driven concepts like DDMRP to establish those buffer positions, stock positions that allow us to pace to the actual demands coming in. That strategy also helps us compress our planning lead times and horizons and puts us in a much, much better place. And then from a production scheduling standpoint, if we protect those stock positions, if we utilize those priorities of those buffer positions to drive the priorities of how we use our production resources, we're going to continually be in a better place than we would be otherwise. On the left side, you've got the make to order. And on the far left, this will be an environment where virtually everything you do is new to a given client's requirement. No shared components. It's all at that point about leveraging your production capacity and resources in the best way possible. It may involve planning to forecast. And so there's a range of tactics between these two ends of the spectrum that we want to be able to support. And that was really kind of behind a lot of the thinking of us bringing to market a demand planning module. And we'll talk a little bit about our suite here. We've added demand planning over here in the lower left. It can drive the S&OP process. It can influence things like forward-looking rates of usage for your buffers. You can plan to forecast if that's required for given types of materials. Again, back on that previous chart in terms of your strategies. And all of this kind of works together in harmony with a great deal of cross-functional integration that I think is quite useful. Demand planning was our latest module to be offered into the market. We started that in September and obviously are seeing real interest and growth in the subscribers to that capability. The demand planning module has a interface or an integrated relationship with the rest of the functionality. And because there tends to be a little bit of asynchronous activity between demand planning and how you utilize the output of your forecast, there is this integration layer that allows us to coordinate and synchronize how we bring data across from the material planning side and the core master data of our demand history and the like, as well as sending the data back from the demand planning module to be utilized. You typically are going to have some collaboration, some socialization of the forecast outlooks, put in various inputs, and you'll bring those through on a coordinated schedule based on how you're running an S&OP process. Some companies, their S&OP is rather early stage, very kind of early stage in terms of the level of process and discipline that they've put in place, while other companies are kind of very sophisticated in how they're trying to use the S&OP process. I believe our solution puts us in a great place with demand planning in here, and I'll show you some examples of this to really facilitate users at both ends of that spectrum. Some of the key features we'll talk about as we get into the software here in a couple minutes. Statistical-based forecasting using AI ML. And one of the key elements of the solution here is that it's designed to be easy to use. In other words, don't require the user to have the smarts to figure out what's the best algorithm I should use for this type of material or this kind of an item. Let the system allow you do that job for you. It's going to do a better job because it can analyze many different algorithms to get you the best one that'll fit your scenario. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we get on the software. You've got the ability to use aggregation as a technique for improving forecast accuracy, as well as simplifying the planning process. If you're trying to plan thousands of items at the item level, you've got a real tough job in front of you. So using aggregations, like we'll look at material type or pack sizes in this example in our demo environment. But the system is quite flexible in terms of how you create those aggregation points and utilize them from a demand planning standpoint. And then finally, this idea of collaborative input. We always need to massage the forecast. There's some organizational intelligence we want to bring into that environment, and we'll talk about how we can bring that along. It's very intuitive. It's very much in line with our passion for ease of use and making the user's job easier. We want them to become more and more confident in the system. And I think there's a big step forward here with the demand planning module. KPI views, I think, are also very important because they help you understand where you are making collaborative inputs, whether you are actually making the forecast more accurate or not. And so we'll show you that in the solution. And then along with that, there's some very flexible reporting that I think will be quite useful. So with that, we'll jump out of here and we will go over to the solution. And we'll go into the demand planning module. Y'all seeing that okay? Should expect so. Okay. Kevin, do you mind? Can you just comment? Everybody seeing the screen okay?
Looks great, Eric.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, we're in Intuiflow. I've opened up the demand planning module. This is kind of the home page. The first thing you notice here is a heat map, which illustrates kind of the ABC classification and XYZ classification. ABC has to do with volume. High is A, B is medium, and C is low. And variation, as you'll see here, Z is high, Y is moderate, and X is lower. And these are all based on a set of rules that you can establish within the system. If you go into the rules screen, you see you can set how you're going to quantify and look at your ABCs. This would say that the A class limit would be 75% of your items, 90% of your items would be in A and B. XYZ classes kind of go in the other direction in terms of coefficient of variation. So very useful to have that kind of view. And if you want to look directly at the items for that class, you can simply click on it and you'll see those items here in the demand planning navigator. What I'd like to do then is go to the, where's our 6-pack 2-liter bottler items, which is the product category we're going to work on here for demand planning demonstration here. You can see that we have 11 items in this cohort. They all have the material type 6-pack 2-liter bottler. That's coming across from the Intuiflow side in terms of key aggregation metrics and things of that nature. And I'll show you that here in a moment as well. And these are all of the items that fit into that. You can notice here that under forecast method, we see different selections being made by the solution as to the forecast method it's utilizing. And it's doing that, identifying which one is going to give us the best accuracy. So when we click to look at a given individual item, we can see what the current forecast is. The blue line here, as you see, represents the historical demand. We're utilizing at least 2 years of historical demand to represent the demand signal that we're going to be building our forecast from. You'll see as well this dotted blue line that is the buildup of the forecast as it progresses and becomes more and more aligned to the true demand pattern. So this is kind of part of the AI/ML pattern recognition. It's helping get affinity between the demand forecast and what the historical demand patterns have been, obviously as a proxy for what's going to happen. The red indicates the actual forecast we're generating. In this case, we're going out on a weekly basis, out 78 weeks in the future. You can forecast on a weekly basis, you can forecast monthly, So there's some flexibility depending on organizational preference and things like that. This is today's forecast. If I go to this dropdown, I can look backwards now to see what the forecast looked like in the prior periods. And you can see what the actual demand was, or the forecast was, versus what the current forecast was for those periods. So you kind of get a sense of how well it's staying in alignment. That's considered a lag factor, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the KPI aspect of the solution. So quite interesting and useful insights to help you see how the overall forecast has progressed over the recent weeks, and gives you kind of a way to correlate back to that. You do have the ability to choose different methods, but we discourage people, let the system do the work. We feel it's better to let the system generate those, learn to trust them, make moderate adjustments where and if needed. But typically, we're going to find better results by utilizing the Intuiflow recommendations and trusting those as we go forward. And we can cursor through to each of the items in that cohort to see what their various forecasts look like. I have the ability to add adjustments, right? So you can see this forecast adjustment line can be done on a percentage basis, or I could go into week 3 here, and let's say I want to put in a very large 500,000 unit kind of promotion. And you'll see that obviously is altering the forecast. It's changing what the revenue outlook would be for that. And we're going to leave that in here for a moment to just see how it reflects in the forecast addition, which means the forecast for that bottling family. You can do this on percentages or in units. You can actually also import an external forecast. So for example, if you have clients that are giving you a customer level forecast for their channel, their sales channel, you have the ability to reflect those here and then use this collaboration platform to analyze and determine what adjustments you want to make. Now, as we said, we're not typically going to be forecasting at the item level. We're going to be doing that in aggregate, and so we'll go over to the forecast addition view, where we're looking now at the bottler location by pack size. And what you can see here immediately is that in that 6-pack 2-liter pack size that we had, that we've got an adjustment in here. And that's reflecting what we saw in the navigator for that one stock item where I put in that 500,000 unit adjustment. So you'll have visibility to where collaborative inputs have been created. In this case, we're going to go ahead and revert that, because I want to show kind of the opposite side of the story. We're going to revert that down. Now, let's say for week 3, we want a 600,000 unit aggregate outlook in terms of units. We'll go ahead, oops. Oh, sorry. Finger check here. So we've put this adjustment in. Let's say we've got a campaign that's going to go on with Walmart, and so we know that we're going to get a big volume increase for that period. When we look back now on the navigator, what we'll see for that pack size is that there will be a reflective change in each of the items as we go through. So it's now taking and downward moving or disaggregating that higher level forecast down to the items based on their relative weight within that pack size family, and doing an appropriate job of getting us the forecast set at the item level. Going back to the aggregation. So we've made an adjustment here. One other thing I'd like to reflect here is that you have lots of flexibility as to how you generate your aggregations. It could be by location first and then by pack size. It could be by simply location. We have a range of user-defined fields, so many companies will have different dimensions and different strategies. One of the aggregation points could be by the customer. So you've got quite a flexible range of options here in terms of how you do this aggregation. And I think that is part of spooling up your demand planning operations and things like that. Part of what the implementation would be about is really determining what are going to be the best fit strategies that we want to follow on that side. You may have product marketing people, your sales channel will have an influence on this. Obviously, there's in different clients, different environments around which you'll get that input and utilize those aggregation points to facilitate your forecast. You can also see kind of what the baseline forecast is. versus the user forecast. You can see that's what the system is telling us, and here's where we've got our aggregation input that we've created. We'll go back to sending to Intuiflow here in a few minutes, where we finally, let's say, have accepted the forecast, and now we want to return that input back into the material planning side of the house. But we'll hold on that here for a minute. The next area is the KPIs, and I think this is an important area of the solution. One is that, you hear the advice from Gartner: quit trying to make your forecast so perfect. And anybody who's got a demand planning job is going to feel like that's what their job is, to get it as close as possible to what we will actually achieve. And what's important to have is a feedback loop, right? How are we actually doing in terms of which forecast adjustments are they adding value? And there's a concept in here called forecast value add. Now, this is static demo data, so you're not seeing any deviations here between the Intuiflow forecast and the user forecast. But had I added collaborative inputs, I would start to see whether I was actually adding value or not. And that would be in terms of accuracy, error, bias, and bias quantities. So the whole concept here is have a feedback loop. Let's try to rein in our desire to, make it perfect if it's not adding value. If we're adding value, great, that's awesome. Let's utilize those inputs and let's try to refine that strategy. But this is kind of looking in the mirror opportunity to really understand, did we get the results to a better place by the adjustments and additions that we've had? Should we revert back to what the system's recommending and maybe moderate what our adjustments would be to only specific types of use cases? This is really, really important in terms of a feedback loop that'll help us make our demand plan. And you will see that view for each of the different pack sizes and categories and things like that. You also have this lag indicator. How far back are we looking? Because we're archiving the forecast each week, and it gives us the opportunity now to say, what would the forecast look like 2 weeks ago versus what actually happened 3 weeks ago, et cetera. And maybe there's a window around which we've got the best view of what our forecast is going to be, and we can start to center our demand planning thinking about that. Next area is dashboards. So this is a very important part of it as well. What you're seeing on the right here, and we'll go to the 6-pack 2-liter again, pack size, is a comparison of the actual demand and the forecast from the actual demand from the previous year. Remember, we have 2 years of history to work with. It'll also show us what the previous year's history was against what our forecast is at the current moment, right, as we go forward. I don't have it loaded, but you can also load a budget figure here, or time series figures, so that we can start to track our performance against our budgets by these different product categories, by locations, regions, things of that nature. So quite helpful. You can do it in units. You can also optimize to other financial elements like price, cost, profitability, and the like. So I think there's a lot of good flexibility in this to not just appeal to it from a material planning standpoint, but also to support some of the needs that the finance and operations folks on your team have in their environment. Finally, we've got the reporting section, very flexible again. In this case, we're looking at a sales forecast for our 6-pack 2 liters. This has been done in price. So it's the average selling price that we utilize in our master data. It's also, as you'll note, being looked at in quarters. So you have some flexibility to set the different time horizons, how you're grouping that data, whether you want to look at it as a cost or a profit forecast and the like. And so you can create as many of these reports for different requirements internally within the solution to support those kind of demand planning needs. We expect to be adding in our Power BI analytics platform additional views going forward. Don't have those available yet, but that's another part of the enhancement that we're going to be making going forward. Now, a lot of this is about, going back to this discussion about agility, is building into our business the flexibility we need. If we look at it from a sales and operations planning standpoint, we'll go to the 6-pack 2-liter pack sizes. And when we go to this page, we're going to see what the promotional demand figures are for the weeks going forward, right? I have not brought the data back from demand planning yet, so we don't see that big adjustment that we've made. But these figures are going to match up with the forecast addition view for that cohort. So if we look at the unit values, we'll see the 600,000 units come across. Now we're going to send this back onto the Intuiflow side. It takes just a few seconds for that to come through. And then once we do that, we're able to rerun the SNOP module to see that reflected in our environment. Now, part of what we do in SNOP is look to find edge cases, situations where projected inventory may be impacted, where there's big promotional events coming along. And the idea is that if everything is running fine, let's not feel like we have to manage it. Let's look for the exceptions that are out there and try to deal with those as they come along. So this will just take a couple seconds to run. But what it's going to do is take that new forecast that we've just loaded, including that large adjustment that we made in the 6-pack 2 liters. It's going to indicate likely some stock exposures where, because we've got such a heavy promotional event during that period, that it's going to rupture our buffer positions. And again, what we're trying to do is ensure that we've got the flexibility to address these kind of events. And so there has to be a good deal of synergy between what we're doing from a demand planning standpoint, how it impacts our material outlooks, and as well then ultimately how it affects our rough cut capacity planning and things like that. Just because we think we can sell 500,000-600,000 units in that week doesn't necessarily mean we've got the capacity or the inventory, the ability to build the inventory for that promotion to give us the kind of results that we're looking for. And so this is part of that synergy that we want to be emphasizing and utilizing with the bringing along the demand planning module into the solution. Okay, it looks like we're all set now. We'll go back to the 6-pack 2 liter group. And here we see that 600,000 unit promotion in the week of January 15th, right? So this is important for us to realize that this is a big event, and we're probably going to see some issues there. And if we go to our inventory for those 6-pack 2 liters, we can open up another tab here. We're going to see that there's going to be several items that are going to be impacted by that and have negative inventory balances because of the impact of that promotion. What we'll see then in the actual buffer projection is this deep decline in the inventory due to the fact that we're running that campaign and we're not able to recover until like a week and a half later. And then we get back to normal demand-driven planning. Everything looks great along the path going forward. So what would we do in this case? And we'll also, let's take a quick look at our rough cut capacity planning. Oh, sorry, I made a new tab. What we can see are the volumes for the product line that is addressing these volumes here. Let me go back and do this one again because I didn't hit the control key. Sorry. Here we go. Hit the control key. Go to rough cut capacity planning because I want to be able to compare the results here after we do this. So we can see that we've got big demand out in that week. We've obviously got some constraints earlier in the year here that we should be addressing. What we then have in the SNOP modules is this ability to create intelligent adjustments. I'm going to do this for a shorter time horizon just for the sake of making the demo go a little bit quicker. What this is going to do is it's going to look for those points where the inventory situations are exposed and then create adjustment factors that'll allow us to do a much better job of reacting to and dealing with these issues. Again, it's an exception management kind of mindset. You know, if we are utilizing this practice to build in the agility, yes, there's going to be known events that we have coming down the road that we want to make sure we've got the flexibility for. But otherwise, for all those other periods that we had in that projection, there's nothing we need to do. We've sized our buffers well. We've got stock available. We've got good views from a capacity planning standpoint and the like. And so when we do this, the system is actually looking through those projections, finding those areas where the ruptures were in terms of the inventory getting below a setting that we have in the system for that threshold, and then creating an adjustment factor, which then raises the height of the yellow zone, triggering earlier supply order generation, which then obviously allows us to have the stock available. The final step being then to run it back through rough cut capacity planning. So let's go back to our 6-pack 2 liters and see what we were able to accomplish. And we'll pick out a couple of these SKUs. Now, it may not have everything exactly perfect, but we should be in much, much better place than we were there a minute ago before we ran this. Still some exposures on a given day, but you can see far less of this. We'll go to this Diet Lemon and see what its projection looks like. You can see that there is a big adjustment made in advance of that promotional period. This product had the heaviest, probably steepest rate of decline in terms of inventory because of how it's part of that aggregation view was impacted. So there may be a need to address this further. We'll go and look at a couple other items. We'll see kind of similar actions on those. If we come down to those in the lower range here, we're probably going to see maybe some, but yeah, very little, because actually we had plenty of inventory. Even though this product was part of that promotion, there was enough inventory on hand that we don't really need to create adjustment factors for that. Now, if we go back to our RCCP view, I'll have to bring it up again. We're going to see a bigger overload on that resource now in that period, in the weeks prior to that. Obviously, we don't have the capacity for that. So the last step here would be to really look at what we can do with that resource now from the standpoint of utilizing it as a constraint in our model. This constraint, by changing it from a non-constrained resource to a constraint for line 1, it is going to finitely schedule, and it will update that, which would then create a revised stock availability. It would generate more work orders earlier to meet that promotional demand. Obviously, there's a window that you need to look at when you run these campaigns, but this is kind of an illustration of the steps that we can go through to improve that from a capacity plan. Here we go. And we'll go back and rerun the RCCP now. Whoops. Sorry, gotta shorten this to 26 weeks. And we'll see a different view of where we're at. Now we are level loaded, right? And that workload was probably pulled forward. There is a revised work order schedule that would give us information. If in fact some of that workload had to go in the past, then we would have to look at further extending. Maybe we would add shift schedules into our resource. Instead of a 12-hour shift, we would see that we need to not only pull work orders further forward, but we also may need to add shift time into our weekly schedule to help address that. So hopefully that illustration was effective for you. This is how we can kind of connect the dots between demand planning, what its outlooks are, giving us the ability to then model those adjustments and those changes in the forecast into what we're bringing across. The final aspect I want to talk about is over here in the settings area, because in one of the key things that questions that typically would come up was, well, that's great for the end items. What are we doing about the materials that are going into that product? And in the processing area here, in terms of our daily usage configurations, we have the ability to explode the forecast down from the parent items down to the child items and utilize that to generate projections on their side. Maybe we're going to have a supplier constraint that is going to impact our ability to run that campaign. But the key is, one is, we can accommodate those adjustments, those known events, those factors that we have to consider. Maybe we're opening a new sales channel and our rates of demand are going to go up. All those kind of scenarios you can illustrate and utilize in the solution. But the other side of it is that we don't have to, align the stars and the planets. Conventional S&OP is about getting a consensus demand plan that we all agree in and that we've studied and we think it's perfect. And then we did generate a consensus supply plan, and we study that, and then all the assumptions that related to those demand and supply plans start to wobble and become a little unreliable. Why can't we instead use a demand plan that is close enough that gives us a good insight, or maybe we run a few different scenarios to test where we have boundaries within our operating model, how we operate our production resources, our material planning on a daily basis, to get us through to a good place in that regard. So, if we do that, now we're building agility. We're thinking not about aligning to that perfect constellation, but we're instead focusing on how do we adjust how we operate? How do we build in that flexibility? If we build in that flexibility, at the end of the day, we're going to be in a much, much better place from a material planning and production scheduling standpoint in operating our supply chain to meet those requirements that may come our way. So with that, we'll go back to the slide deck here, and let's see if we had any questions that I can answer. Hopefully this illustration was helpful for you. Feel free to utilize the Zoom question panel, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, Eric, we got one come in. Can it apply an automatic planned adjustment in the buffers when the software projects a stock out because of a promotion?
Yes, we can do that. That's what that calculate intelligent adjustments. A lot of companies are running that are users of the solution are running it on a recurring basis. Some of them are finding good value in utilizing those calculated adjustments as a natural part of their operation. So absolutely, that's what it's there for, to take and make it something that the system's doing for you instead of you having to try to do the math to figure those things out.
Okay, got another one. Can we run demand planning and use the output directly into an FDU value?
Absolutely, yeah. That was kind of what those settings were that I just illustrated, but both at the parent item level and the child item levels, the forecasted can be converted into that forecasted daily usage FDU value. Many of our clients use FDUs to size the buffers, but they paste the actual resupply, the orders that are generated from that, off what the true demand is, the actual demand that's coming in. So I think there's a great marriage there between utilizing your forecast to size your buffer positions and then allowing them to paste to the real demand that comes in. That's very, very effective in products that have some level of seasonality and things like that. Sometimes even with an FDU, you'll have a promotional event that's a big spike, and so you'll also still need to maybe use some of the adjustment factors to protect those stock availabilities.
Okay, got another one. Is it possible to put in a comment when a forecast adjustment is made so we can see why the change was made?
Great question. I don't think we have, this is one thing I didn't share, and I apologize. I'm going to go back to the software here for a second. Let's go back to demand planning. So one thing you have is the ability to share with the users in your organization their responsibilities. So in the sharing area of the application, say if I wanted to give Bernard the ability to share, and I want him to be in managing certain locations, like is equal to, exactly matches Depot 1, right? What that would do is give Bernard the responsibility to manage the forecasting for all those elements. So you'll see their inputs in the aggregation screens and on those individual forecasts, as we were saying. We don't have a facility right now to put notes against those at the current time, but that's a possible feature enhancement that we'll be adding. Sorry that I didn't cover this earlier. It was on my agenda and I just skipped right over it. So apologies for that. Other questions?
Yep, we got one more. Can it adjust the forecast using external factors automatically if my forecast depends on exchange rate, international prices, etc.?
Yes, as you can see here, you've got the ability here to make adjustments manually. You also have in the data upload the ability to update, add other forecasts, external forecasts and things like that. So the facilities are there to allow you to bring in external inputs and utilize them as a point of comparison. You may still further massage those in the navigator here where you're editing the various volumes and things like that. But yes, you have the ability to do that.
Okay, Eric, that's all I got right now.
Good deal. Well, thanks everyone for attending the webinar today. We greatly appreciate your interest in the platform. I think it's a great complement to what we've already had with Intuiflow. It's obviously got a great affinity to the S&OP module, helping kind of round that out. And going back to what I talked about at the opening part of the presentation, our commitment is to help clients create this agility and resilience, because in doing so, they get better inventory turnover rates, they get better on-time order fill rates. That's kind of the whole mission of life for DD Tech and for our solutions. So we think that this is a great complement. Very interested to speak with you afterwards if you're interested and want to have a more detailed, in-depth discussion. Happy to do that. And so with that, we'll conclude the webinar. I want to wish you all a happy holiday season. Hope you all had a great 23. Looking forward to an exciting new year in 2024. Thanks all. Have a great day.